Okay, welcome everyone. It is good to have you on board and especially good to be back on a webinar with CIAIM talking about biodiversity net gain. And my thanks to the team at CIAIM for hosting us. So today we will be talking about reptiles when designing for biodiversity net gain. And as a starting point, let's meet the team. So hello everyone, I'm Julia, Technical Director of Nature Services, and today I'm joined by Anna.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna. I was until recently the Nature Positive Team Lead for Switzerland. Next week, I'm moving to a new similar role. Our apologies from Stuart Graham. He couldn't join us because he had an emergency survey to undertake today. Stuart is quite famous in the sector for his reptile herpetological background with a PhD in herpetology, and he helped us with the assessments today. Next one is Nicole.
Hi all, so I'm Nicole King. I'm Senior Ecologist at Sistra. I've assisted with a lot of the BNG data interpretation for what we're about to present as well. And on to Vicky.
Hi everyone, so I'm Vicky Agar. I'm a Senior Ecologist as well at Sistra, and yeah, I've also supported with some of the suitability assessments and with the BNG and our case study at the end.
So I will start with a bit about mandatory biodiversity net gain, just in case anyone needs a refresher. As we go through, you'll hear from Anna about the methods, and then you'll hear from Nicole and Vicky about this, what I think is a really exciting tool to let's start to integrate and to consider reptiles when we design biodiversity net gain. If you have any questions, please, by all means, post them in the Q&A. So I'll keep an eye on the Q&A. Don't use the chat unless you've got any kind of IT or admin issues. So any questions, do put them in the Q&A. But as always, let's start. Let's start with what is biodiversity net gain. And I'm hoping you've heard me talk about this before, because now it's more important than ever to think about what is good practice. So biodiversity net gain. Development that leaves biodiversity in a measurably better state than before. And our good practice principles published in 2016 still stand the test of time. They provide a framework for us all to follow to demonstrate that we've achieved biodiversity net gain by following good practice. We've now moved into mandatory biodiversity net gain. So if you move on to the next slide, Vicky. So this now applies to most developments seeking planning permission. And there's the mitigation hierarchy in the PPG, in the planning policy guidance. For developments subject to mandatory biodiversity net gain, we follow the biodiversity gain hierarchy. And I love it. I love the fact that there's a second gate. You have the mitigation hierarchy, then you've got the biodiversity gain hierarchy. And that's avoiding reducing impacts on those very high and medium distinctiveness habitats. Remember that, because we'll pick that up in the discussion about reptile suitability. And then on-site enhancement, on-site habitat creation, before looking for local BNG provision. And as a very, very last resort, let's do not go there, those very last resort statutory credits. Now, we all demonstrate biodiversity net gain using the statutory biodiversity metric to achieve that minimum increase in biodiversity units. And those on-site significant enhancements and off-site provision must be secured for a minimum of 30 years. And I just want to really shout out to those two web links at the bottom there. Really useful resources by CIAIM. There's one which is biodiversity enhancement throughout the UK, and that biodiversity net gain resource page. If you're like me, you've now seriously got a whole load of favorites because of all the blogs and the website and the guidance. It's all there in that one web page, which is super helpful. Next slide, please. So just in case people are wondering about the statutory biodiversity metric, and it comes a lot into play in terms of the tool that the team worked on. So we collect data on habitat types, and most of that is aligned with UK HAB version 2. We collect data on the size of those habitats, so hectares, kilometres. We score the habitat condition, which is ecological condition from poor, moderate or good. And we think about the location under strategic significance. So the metric takes all that information, puts a number on it, and then calculates the baseline habitat units. Next slide, please. And it's really understanding that the metric is a tool, but it's one tool in the toolkit. You know, ever since, you know, back in the day when we were working on our good practice principles, we always talked about the metric as being that one tool in the toolkit. So it's not just about the numbers that you're seeing there on the screen. It's not just about meeting the trading rules. It's really thinking what is the heart and the essence of biodiversity net gain. Next slide, please, Vicky. Which is about habitats. You know, this is about developments that create or enhance more or better wildlife-rich habitats for a minimum of 30 years. And what's always been really good about B&G is the habitat-based approach. But I've always thought of it as a kind of like the build it and they will come. You know, so let's build those habitats and animals will come. But now this is mandatory net gain. Now we've got the biodiversity gain hierarchy on site significant enhancements. I'm starting to get a little bit lost in, have we met everything? You know, have we literally gone through all of the mandatory requirements? And I think we need to actually come back to this, because unless we focus really specifically on certain habitats and certain species and meet their needs, animals might not come. So from a mandatory biodiversity net gain perspective, it's here, it's landed. As ecologists, we need to up the game now to make sure that we're designing those wildlife-rich habitats in a way that meets species-specific needs. And it was fantastic to have this conversation with Anna. We were chatting about it. And you said, well, hang on a sec, reptiles will make a really good case study. So Anna, from your perspective, build it and they will come. What does that mean in terms of the world of reptiles?
Thank you, Julia. So yes, correct. The biodiversity net gain is about habitats. But when we design for biodiversity net gain, the ecological principles must underpin the design and also the long-term habitat and monitoring plans. But there is no species-specific guidance on how biodiversity net gain can build on species mitigation and achieve that minimum 10% biodiversity net gain in ways that benefit species populations. So, to address this gap, we developed a methodology for ecologists to assess whether habitats being enhanced or created for biodiversity net gain are suitable for reptiles. Our aim was to maximize the benefits of biodiversity net gain design for reptiles by providing guidance on aligning the biodiversity metric habitats with habitats that are suitable for reptiles. So, during my talk, I will present you how we created this spreadsheet trying to answer this question, will they come, and what do we need to do in order to help them come in the methodology section. I will present some useful results from our assessments in the results section, and then I will give you some instructions on how you can use the spreadsheet we created in order to be able to assess the B&G habitats for reptiles. So the statutory biodiversity metric includes 150 habitat types that belong to 17 broad habitat groups. We created an Excel spreadsheet. It's a very simple Excel spreadsheet with the 150 habitat types and their distinctiveness as defined in the statutory metric. So we created a short video for you where you can see how you can filter for grassland, for example, and see all the habitat types and their distinctiveness. Great, thank you, Vicky. So what we did, we scored habitat types from all habitat groups on their suitability to support each reptile species. We did this for all 6 reptile species found in the United Kingdom: adder, smooth snake, grass snake, viviparous lizard, sand lizard, and slower. So to do this, if you can move to the next slide, please, Vicky, thank you. The scores of habitat types were converted into a suitability index on a scale ranging from 1 to 5. Score 1 was given to habitats with very poor or no suitability for reptiles. Score 2 was given to habitats with poor suitability. Score 3 to habitats with moderate suitability. Score 4 to habitats with good, and score 5 to habitats with very good suitability for reptiles. Suitability index values were assigned based on authors' field experience and expertise, on literature review and expert consultation. We know that habitat suitability is dependent of species behavior, etc., throughout the year. So what we did was we assessed the habitat suitability based on typical species behavior, typical species habitat requirements and utilization, and current habitat utilization. We know that reptiles need a variety of habitat types across the season for hibernation, breeding, and thermoregulation, and this was also considered in our assessments. So one score per habitat type was given for each of the 6 reptile species. Therefore, a total of 6 scores were assigned to each habitat type. So in total, we gave 900 scores. And here is, again, a video where you can see the spreadsheet with the assessment completed for all reptile species. You can filter, for example, for grassland again here and see the suitability of each habitat type for each reptile species. It's very simple to use. Now, for the purposes of this webinar, we excluded the smooth snake and sand lizard from the results that we will present to you. You know that these species are in known locations, predominantly protected through their inclusion within sites subject to national and/or international designation. Please note that while the guidance provided here is formulated by experienced professionals, it does not constitute official legislation or fall under the official guidance of the statutory biodiversity metric. It is imperative to adhere to the rules and principles as outlined by the statutory biodiversity metric, and as always, exercising professional judgment remains crucial. Also, habitat condition assessment in relation to reptiles is not included in this webinar, but please watch this space. So let's move to the results. So our findings indicated that not all habitats are suitable for reptiles, and I'm sure that this doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. So if we group together the habitats that scored good and very good suitability for reptiles, we will see that from the 150 habitat types, 31% scored good and very good suitability for grass snake, 27% for under, 19% for slowworm, and 32% for viviparous lizard. And this finding confirms the ongoing discussions about reptile-specific habitat requirements and highlights the importance of maintaining, enhancing, and creating habitats suitable for reptiles. And now, with this spreadsheet, how the biodiversity net gain can be an opportunity to do so. Then we thought about distinctiveness. Okay, not all habitats are suitable for reptiles. Let's see, for those habitats with good and very good suitability for reptiles, what is their distinctiveness of these habitats? So on the graph on the right, we group together habitats with very low and low distinctiveness and with high and very high distinctiveness. And that, as you can see, about 20% of the 46 habitat types with good and very good suitability for grass snake is of low and very low distinctiveness. And similar are the results we got for the other reptile species, about 17% for under, 19% for slowworm, and 16% for viviparous lizards. So we know that the biodiversity gain hierarchy prioritizes avoidance of impacts on medium, high, and very high distinctiveness habitats. Given the legal protection of reptiles, any lower distinctiveness habitats that are suitable for reptiles should be a consideration for decision on application of the biodiversity gain hierarchy. And here is a video again, where you can filter for grassland and quickly see the distinctiveness scores and habitat suitability for each reptile species. So very easily, I know that you can see sand lizard and smooth snake, but if you can see, you can very quickly see the suitability for of this specific habitat for each reptile, but also what the distinctiveness of this habitat is. Now, some instructions on how you can use the spreadsheet. The Excel spreadsheet enables you to filter the 150 habitat types for habitats that you are considering for your biodiversity net gain designs in order to understand what is the suitability of these habitats for reptiles. By applying these filters, you can extract results for each species or combined results for multiple species if you want. And here is an example of how you can extract habitats with low and very low distinctiveness that's scored as having good and very good suitability for grass snake. And here you are. How do you do it? To get these results, you filter the habitat suitability for grass snake. Sorry, Vic, I think you moved to the next one. It's okay, it doesn't matter. I think the video demonstrated how we do it. Now, other ways to use the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet again can guide you to make decisions that benefit reptiles. For example, if you wish to create habitats with good or very good suitability for all reptile species, we have created a formula that allows you to filter for these habitats. It is a yes option, as you can see here at the video. And it shows you those grassland habitats that score good and very good suitability for all 4 reptile species. So you don't have to look individually at each column for each species. And there are more formulas in the spreadsheet to allow you to extract quickly results in order to make decisions on your biodiversity net gain design. And with that in mind, I will pass to Nicole, where she will present to you the baseline of a case study we created for you in order to help you understand how the spreadsheet works. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we appreciate a lot of the information that we've given you in the nature of B&G is numbers heavy. So as Anna mentioned, we have developed this case study for us to work through in order to demonstrate how our tool can actually be used. So we have a red line boundary for a proposed development. In total, within the red line boundary is 10 hectares worth of area. Now, some baseline assessments have been carried out from which 4 habitats have been identified. These are tussocky arable margins, cereal crops, mixed scrub, and open mosaic. Now, we had some historic records and comments from the landowner indicating the presence of slowworms within the site, and they were right. It was found to be accurate, and we found slowworms not only within the site, but a significant population was found in the surrounding area as well. Now, we've also collected a little bit more baseline information for you as well. So site visits determined that all of the habitats that we had were of similar condition. So we're going to be treating these 4 habitat types as their own individual instances. So we're not going to have 2 plots of open mosaic as we progress through this, for example. Now, conditions assessments determined that scrub and open mosaic were both in poor condition, while condition assessments are not applicable for the cropland habitats. Assumptions have been made with regards to strategic significance, but for the purposes of this case study, we won't be covering those further. At the end of this, oh, sorry, Vicky, would you mind? Sorry, thank you. At the end of this, we ended up with a total of 33.92 units as our biodiversity baseline. Now, some initial design has taken place. We now understand the area that's going to be impacted within our site by temporary and permanent development. So this is shown here on this slide by the green boundary. So within this green boundary, we have a bit of sealed surface that's going to be going in. For anyone looking at this going, oh, I could just move that. We've already thought of that. We have some hypothetical constraints and conditions that came along with our case study that mean, unfortunately, our bound surface has to go exactly where it is. So we can't move it to not impact the open mosaic or habitats that are suitable for our slowworms. So this is what we're working with. Now we've had a bit of area that's had to be temporarily cleared to facilitate the construction of the bound surface. And that's shown here in this screenshot by the question mark areas. So at the moment it's bare earth, it's been temporarily cleared. So we've got a little bit of an opportunity for some habitat creation to go in here. So let's have a look at what the development has done so far for our B&G numbers. Now we agreed with the local planning authority that our target for the site is going to be 10%. Which means that we have to achieve 37.32 units at the end of this. After initial development, we're currently sat at 21.44 units. So we need to find 15.88 units, because in clearing the area that was within the green boundary, we actually ended up losing 12.48 units. But everything that's outside of that green boundary is going to be retained. So we've actually retained 21.44 units so far. This means that we need to achieve 15.88 units in order to meet our target. Now, I've noted here that we have enhancement and creation so far of 0 because we don't score anything for having installed a bound surface. But I'm also going to put a pin in this quickly for me to cover a couple of caveats. Now, one of the first things we need to look at when we come to do this in real life is looking at the trading rules. So trading rules are a mandatory requirement of the B&G calculation. But for the purposes of this case study, we won't be going into detail in them. They will be met, but we just won't be diving into those, just so we can cover what our tool can do. Now, here are a couple of caveats I'm pretty sure every ecologist would love to hear. Money is no object for this scenario, and soil is not a constraint. We know that's not realistic, but again, for the purposes of this case study, we have made these not constraints. So when you see our proposals, money wasn't an issue. Now, what were our options that were left to us? So we could either do a bit of enhancement with the areas that were left to us outside of the green boundary, and we've got an opportunity to do a little bit of creation. Tackling enhancement first, we've been able to carry out a bit of enhancement in the area that's been highlighted by the yellow boundary. This was because our baseline condition assessments had this down as poor, and we're going to increase this to moderate. Again, we've already done this in the background, so we've done the condition assessments and the improvements. Now, in doing this, we've managed to achieve 3.23 units from mixed scrub and 5.69 units from our open mosaic habitat. Now, if we add this to our retained habitats, which is now the section that was outside of the green boundary and now also outside our yellow boundary, so that's our 2 cropland habitats. Adding this to that total that was 16.8 units, this brings our current total, after this initial bit of development, up to 25 units for biodiversity net gain. So we still need to find 12.32 units to meet our 10% target. So this is where I'm going to hand you over to Vicky, who's going to go into the next section.
Thanks, Nicole. So the next bit is looking at the creation element of our case study. So this is our opportunity to propose and choose different habitats that fit in with the landscape and provide us that net gain. So as Nicole mentioned, this is looking at primarily the area outlined in blue, which is all of our question mark areas, which were cleared for construction. We've got 2.1 hectares available for this. And following our enhancement, as Nicole said, we've still got a minimum of 12.32 units to find to meet our 10% net gain. Whilst we're doing this, we need to think not only of the habitats that are going to help us achieve this net gain, but are also going to benefit our slow worms. So in the first scenario, we designed purely with the BNG in mind. So hypothetically here, we would want to choose habitats of medium to very high distinctiveness to help us achieve this net gain. So here we chose some rebeds, pond, and some willow scrub in order to help us meet this target. So when we plug this into our metric to see how many units we generated, we got 8.77 for the rebeds, 2.49 for the pond, 1.5 for the willow scrub. When we added this to our retained and our enhanced units, this gave us a total of 37.77. So we've met our 10% net gain requirement. However, when we checked this within our spreadsheet to check these habitat suitability, as you can see, none of these are going to be very good for our slow worm. So here we've only sort of met half of our requirements. We've done well for B&G, but we've not done so well for our slow worm. Scenario 2, we took the opposite approach, designing purely with slow worm habitat in mind. So here we used our general knowledge and experience and a bit of our spreadsheet to see which habitats would have good suitability for our slow worm. So we decided to extend our field margins of that tussocky, our mixed scrub, and then we suggested modified grassland. From our snapshot of our spreadsheet, you can see that all 3 of these habitats score as good for our slow worm. But as you can imagine, when we put it into our BNG metric, we only got 2.55 for the field margin, 4.42 for the additional mixed scrub, and 3.43 for the modified grassland. Adding this to our retained and our enhancement units, we didn't meet our 10% net gain target. We only got as far as 4.38% gain. So there again, we've only managed to meet one of our requirements. We've done well for our slow worms, but we've not met our BNG requirement. And this is really where our spreadsheet comes in to help. So by filtering on our slow worm column for the good and very good suitability, scores 4 and 5, and then checking our distinctiveness, so for anything medium to very high, it gives us some options that we can use to propose to meet both of our requirements. So in our last scenario, this is what we did. We again extended our tussocky field margins and our mixed scrub, but within the rest of the space, we put in some traditional orchards and some lowland meadow. This gave us more units in our BNG metric. So we got 5.55 for the additional mixed scrub, 1.94 for the orchards, 2.55 for the additional margin, and 3.06 for the lowland meadow. Adding this to our retained and enhancement again, gave us a total of 38.1 units, which is more than our net gain target of 37.32. So this led us to satisfy both of our requirements. Oh, sorry, skipped ahead. So as I said, this is good and very good suitability for our slow worm as based from our spreadsheet. And this led us to satisfy both of our requirements and design suitable habitat considerate of our slow worms, but also meeting the biodiversity net gain. Now, in real life, we understand that it's more likely we would end up with a mix of habitats and not all would have good or very good suitability for reptiles. But it just helps, our spreadsheet is there to help with how we can use it to help with the decision-making and justification processes. Obviously, this case study was very hypothetical and probably, yeah, just to help showcase the use of our spreadsheet. Julia, back to you.
Thank you. And we wanted to give a bit of time for question discussion and your thoughts as well. We've had 2 in there, which I'll answer quickly, and I've got some questions for the team, but please do post your questions. We appreciate that was a lot of information quite quickly, so we wanted to come through any points of clarification. We can certainly go back and have a look at the tool as well. So the first brilliant question was, can we have the spreadsheet, please? Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank the team here. Anna and I were chatting about BNG and you just came up with this solution and this tool, working really hard behind the scenes. And I really, firstly, love that. I really love the way that you saw a gap, saying, well, actually, I think we can do something here. Other people talk about the gap, but don't necessarily do something. And you really did this. And we want to share what I think is a really helpful tool. So watch this space. Vicky's working behind the scenes, created a web page that we can then download it. So just watch this space, and we can certainly post that around. Another really interesting question about, will we develop this for other species? Which, isn't it great? You know, and I think I really love that question, because I think what we're trying to do is, I mean, there's such a BNG community of practice anyway, and I think we'd love to inspire and collaborate with others, because I think absolutely that this has wide applicability to other species. So if anyone is interested, please get in touch. We're all on LinkedIn, or, you know, post your name in the chat there, because I think what we're finding, my first question to you, Anna, was that you said there's the mandatory BNG, biodiversity gain hierarchy, you know, and I just kind of zoom in on there. But then reptile legal requirements are over there, and these individual policies, it does come to us to start joining the dots. And I really liked your point about, well, actually this tool just helps that, because it is quite difficult, you know, like juggling everything in the round. Anna, what is your advice about when best to use the tool? I mean, is it super early? Do you think reptiles, BNG, then do you use the tool? because you see both, you see reptiles, you see B&G. I'm just kind of over here in B&G. What's your advice for people about when they should really look at the tool?
So for me, because as everybody on this call, I am a professional that has to deal with planning submissions, with biodiversity net gain submissions these days in sites where we until yesterday we were mainly thinking about the protected species, and now biodiversity net gain is a priority and has the same significance with the ecological mitigation. For me, the advice is that these things now need to go hand by hand. We cannot think of the one and then of the other, because it is the habitats that species will utilize. So we need to consider how these habitats are suitable for the species from the early stages. And the truth is that the biodiversity net gain statutory metric has given us already a different way of thinking, because until yesterday we didn't have similar tools in our hands where we could enter data and see what the outcome is. And I thought that this is how we consider creating this for reptiles. And yes, we will follow up with other species too, or species groups, because there are trends. So we might help with some general guidance about species trends on habitat requirements. So again, watch this space. But for reptiles specifically, to make the species come, Julia, as which is the main question where all this started from, we have to consider them from the early stages, from when we get the information about our site, know approximately what the development will look like, understanding the desk data, understanding what is the current utilization of the area, understanding connectivity, the metric, the biodiversity metric zooms you into the site. Our spreadsheet does the same, but one advice for everybody on this call is that don't forget also to zoom out and look at your surroundings, look at what is happening in the surrounding landscaping, to make sure that as you already do anyway when you design mitigation for protected species, to make sure that you take into consideration the wider habitat, but also the specifics of your site. And it is only there to help you get quickly some information, because what happens to all of us is that when we deal with one task, we focus on this, and sometimes we can easily miss something that is there in front of us, but we can't see it because we're focusing on one task. This spreadsheet just helps you quickly remind yourself, okay, reptiles, I have to also design for reptiles, and do a quick filtering and see what result this has for your reptiles. So it allows you, how I say it, it gives you the opportunity to do more things than one at the same time.
And I think that's a lovely point, because it's like the tool, we're building up the toolkit. You know, we've always talked about the metric being a tool in the toolkit, and what you're doing is saying, no, this is for ecologists to own and design biodiversity net gain, but it's a tool to help you. We've had a question about the scoring. So maybe Anna, you start, and then Vicky and Nicole do come in, because I want to ask you what you found in terms of most interesting. Anna, to go back to the scoring of habitat suitability, can you present a little bit more about the details that you talked about?
Yes, Vicky, do you mind going to the key? We have a slide with the key. So a lot of work has been done in the background, and again, when we will release the spreadsheet with the suitability scoring, we would love to hear your feedback and see what your thoughts are with regards to the suitability, habitat suitability we gave to certain habitats. So to do the scoring, we created this 5-linkered scale, and we scored each habitat type from 1 to 5. Now, how did we do the scoring? Based on literature review, expert consultation with the scientific officer of Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust and professionals from Bangor University. And we scored its habitat alone. Know how it is. It's very difficult sometimes to, for example, you will say a lake is suitable for it. It is important, a source of water, so it is important for all species. But you have to, what we did was consider its specific habitat for its suitability for its species. And this is how we ended up with the scoring. I don't know if you want to see some examples. Maybe when the spreadsheet will be released in our website, then Vicky is kindly preparing an area within the website where people will have the opportunity to comment. So any comments on the scoring proposed from this scientific team will be very welcome, and discussions.
Yeah, and just quickly, because the questions are flooding in. So Vicky and then Nicole, over to you. Vicky and Nicole, when you were working on the scoring, just one thing from you both, what did you find most interesting as you were working out the scoring? Vicky, to start with you first, then Nicole.
Yeah, for me, it was oftentimes where you'd have a habitat that you'd immediately sort of be your go-to when you're doing B&G assessments of, it's not a very valuable habitat in terms of distinctiveness. A lot of our go-to ones are more cropland based ones because they're something that we can actually improve by changing the habitat type to increase our biodiversity units. There was quite a big correlation between those habitats having suitability that scored quite highly for our reptile friends. So it was a really useful sort of reminder to go, right, okay, I know I've got to do B&G, which was where the tool was really useful. It's like, but also I know I have slow worms present. Our margins were something that was really valuable for them. So while that might be my gut reaction as someone that's predominantly doing B&G focus, it gives me a bit of a step back to go, we're in the numbers. There's a lot of numbers floating around here. It just prompted me to remember that might be my first target, but slow worms also very much like that. So maybe it's not the one I want to jump to first when it comes to doing design.
Vicky, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, mine's quite similar. I was quite surprised, or not surprised per se, but it was quite interesting to see how many habitats that have low and very low distinctiveness for B&G are really, really good for the reptiles. And as Nicole just said, those are your go-to to sort of repurpose first. So yeah, it's just important to make sure that, you know, they're probably the ones that are also most common that we find on most of our sites when we're doing development as well. So yeah, it was quite interesting to see that relationship between distinctiveness and suitability.
And you did a lot of work on condition, so I know there's more to come on that, but we've had some questions about condition. When assigning the suitability for reptiles to different habitats and different conditions, did you find that moderate condition targets might be better suited for reptiles than the good condition? You know, and with B&G we always need to think about the feasibility, and, you know, like jumping to target good condition, you know, might just beyond what the site can take. But I thought it was a really nice question about, actually, do you think it's more moderate condition that are better for reptiles?
Do you want me to say what we think about conditions, Julia? Okay, so as we said at the beginning, it's still ongoing, the analysis of the conditions, but it does feel that the conditions are generally positive for reptiles or might not have a negative effect. So very interesting question about moderated good condition. Once we have all our scoring finalized, it will be very easy to play these two scenarios and come with a result on this. I now look forward to run this analysis. So thank you for the question.
No, exactly. And I think that's quite the interesting one, because generally it's probably more, would you think it's more about distinctiveness and actually condition? There's there are more benefits for reptiles in certain conditions, but it's probably more going to be about the habitat type. Would that would you say?
Yes, Julia. And I think that what this spreadsheet, what this analysis did to me is that we do have all these ongoing discussions about reptile species in decline in the UK, that there is this habitat fragmentation, isolation. We have all these issues with the reptiles, and but we couldn't qualify it. And now here are the 150 habitat types we ecologists have in front of us for the biodiversity net gain metric to create new habitats. And having the numbers and seeing how low from these 150 habitats are the percentages that are suitable habitats for reptiles, it does come to show that here is the problem, and here is why it is important for you when you design for biodiversity net gain. You now have a tool, you now have an opportunity to actually think of these specific habitat requirements the species have. And I'm sure that when we proceed to the analysis for other species too, we will end up with similar trends. So for me, it gave me something in my hands, or percentages, to argue that we do have an issue. There are not many habitats, so we do have to consider these species as early as possible in the design process.
And actually, we were just talking about, what's interesting with, because the conditions seem to be either neutral or positive, but it's also about, have you lost something that's been really suitable for reptiles? And Nicole and Vicky, your case study about, well, hey, we've done B&G, but it's the loss as well. So I think there's a two question there. One is, what's the best habitats, reptiles, but what did we start with, and then can we make it better? Got a really lovely question from Darren. Darren, you produced a similar tool for adders. So Darren, where have you been? Gosh, let's definitely link up. Does this one consider abiotic factors such as topography, slope, and direction for basking high binocular, or is it just habitat types? Good question.
Right, Darren, you definitely need to get in touch, first of all. And secondly, not with regards to the habitat types. So the habitat suitability is only for the habitat types. It doesn't take into consideration these factors. Some of these factors are covered in the habitat conditions. So, but there is still a gap. And this is a good question and a good reminder for all of us. These are tools that can help us, but don't give us the answers to everything. When we design habitats and when we produce our management plans, this is our opportunity as ecologists to add all the other specific requirements that are not covered from these assessments. It is a high-level assessment that help us design, but doesn't answer all the questions.
And just to follow on from that, someone said, well, how should we include those micro habitats such as basking banks, high binocular, in our assessment of post-development designs, and can this increase the suitability score? And I think, Anna, it's interesting. I mean, for me, there's a design, not everything needs a number on it. Absolutely, we do have the tool, and we do have to demonstrate B&G, but we need this to be a really great habitat design in general. But it's interesting what you're thinking about conditions. So maybe there were points in the habitat condition assessment that actually you could have those micro habitats. What's your take on that?
Absolutely, Julia. So we don't have to provide a number at the end that shows an increased suitability for reptiles. I know that when Vicky presented, she referred to achieving both conditions, statutory biodiversity net gain metric and good habitat for reptiles. Reminder, only the statutory biodiversity net gain metric is the one that we need to give a number to. For the suitability for reptiles, we still need to apply professional judgment and use this tool to assign, when possible, habitats that are suitable for reptiles, this is the number one tool we have. Second tool that will come is conditions, and are there any habitats that the conditions that we will choose in order to target the condition criteria, sorry, I keep forgetting saying this word, that we will choose to target a specific condition are beneficial for reptiles. And third, in our design, in our master plans, have we created microhabitats? Have we created slopes with the right facing direction for reptiles? And all these additional things we need to do to increase suitability. So please don't think that this replaces everything. All different steps are required. It just gives you the opportunity to extract easily information about habitats that you might have to think about or go back to literature review to remind yourselves with regards to their availability, suitability, sorry.
And Vicky and Nicole, just to quickly bring you in here, I think that relates to what you were saying, wasn't it? It's a tool to help us. We've got so many things now, which is amazing and great. But it's about marrying up, there might be a B&G person and it's really helping them to marry that up, the tool. Is that right, Vicky?
Yeah, exactly. It's to help make that decision. There's always going to be situations where you might have some habitats that don't have suitability for reptiles because you've got other taxa that you need to also be designing for. You can't have everything that's great for everything. You need that mosaic and those differences. But yeah, it's just a tool to help people make those initial decisions about which habitat they might try and target to propose.
And then, Joe, thank you for your question. So do you think there might be cases where reptiles are present that the LPAs may be prepared to accept less than the minimum 10% in B&G? I find the B&G unit delivery focus is often just on the highest value rather than what's best for ecology. Joe, it's such an important point because B&G has never been a numbers game. We are in this place of needing measurable gains in biodiversity, but good practice has always been to use the metric as a tool and to really base this on what is good practice. But I've certainly seen that kind of numbers-driven approach, which is not good practice. To absolutely highlight, Joe, that this is now a mandatory requirement with a minimum 10%. So what we hope is that this tool enables us to marry these things up. Let's make sure that we are achieving that minimum 10% in B&G in ways that meet the metric rules, that meets metric requirements, meets good practice. So in our good practice principles, there is what's best for biodiversity, and also designing those B&G habitats in ways that maximize the benefits for reptiles. So yes, Joe, I think as an industry, hopefully those situations when B&G is numbers driven will be few and far between, but it does happen. And we run these webinars, we run a lot of training courses to hopefully bring up that benchmark of good practice. What's your thoughts on that, team?
No, I agree with you, and it is a good point, Joy. And it is again for us the opportunity as ecologists to try and it is not what it is more important or not, but it is working together with the local planning authorities, to my opinion, and seeing what is best in every occasion. And we do need to move sometimes away from our small sites and think the wider picture, what is happening in this area. What are we, is this site critical for the conservation status of this species? Will this affect if the conservation status of the species? Do I have an opportunity at my mitigation site to do something differently? Is it more important? So it's a number of things that we need to consider always in order to understand what is best.
And there's a follow-on piece from Matthew about this. What is the risk of using this tool in that we then go the other way? You know, what we're trying to do is help have that balance, you know, not the numbers-driven approach, but designing habitats based for B&G based on sound ecological principles. And if there's a site with a particular reptiles, here's a tool to help you maximize the benefits that B&G habitats have for reptiles. But Matthew's point is, well, hang on a sec, what if we go down here and then we override what could be, I'll just read his questions out, in prioritizing certain species could have unintended detrimental effects for the overall resilience of habitats and biodiversity being created. And I just think that that speaks really well to this question about, you know, we're now driving the design. And I think it's that moment where as a professional ecology community, we are driving the B&G design, and we do have to make sure that we're constantly in this sweet spot in the middle. You know, we're not, gosh, reptiles, that's great. We're not a numbers game. It's that sweet spot, isn't it, Anna?
It is, and there are certain principles, rules, etc. for biodiversity net gain. It's the management plans, the biodiversity plan that accompanies the biodiversity net gain assessment. The habitats, in a way, are been secured. It is now how we help as professionals to include, to feel more confident that we considered the species in our design. So for me, I wouldn't worry about moving from the one end to the other, because biodiversity net gain is secured in many different ways, and the habitats creation, resilience, and monitoring is hopefully there now. What we are trying to do is give our profession the confidence that we can also think of the protected species at the same time, while we are doing our best for habitats.
And a question, when will condition come along? So we've mentioned this is about distinctiveness. You've been doing a lot of work about condition, and I love the fact saying, can you hurry up, please, Anna? You got when just a sense of timeline. I know that the webpage we're looking at around the summertime, so do watch this space.
We're hoping by September to have everything in place and published.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, lovely question. We often see habitat creation enhancement targeting a single habitat type across an area. You mentioned the importance of mosaics for reptiles, not just for reptiles, just generally. Would, for example, grassland and scrub together generate a greater uplift for reptiles versus one of the habitats on its own?
Well, it depends. It depends. Biodiversity net gain needs to be achieved. What units do I get? And in certain habitats, the conditions give you the opportunity to have, for example, shrub, as you mentioned. So is the shrub I'm creating, if I create this habitat, do I consider this enough for reptiles, or do I have to move to a different habitat type and create something different? I think having this tool gives you the opportunity to easily play and filter and see both at your conditions and the suitability, what works best, what options you have available, and what works best for your side with regards to biodiversity net gain, while you have considered your different options for reptiles.
Yeah, exactly. And really nice note from Betty. We now have reptiles on some of our wildlife sites along the A66. That's lovely to hear. This was tricky at first due to the ongoing annual establishment. However, we tweaked the grass cutting works to work with the reptiles, such as leaving a strip of grassland at the back of these sites, which is really nice. Betty, please publish a case study or LinkedIn article or something. I think that's a really nice case study. Have you looked into the ongoing establishment of new habitats with potential reptiles? Anna, we were just talking about that.
Yes. So again, this is to come, follow-up work on okay, we have covered what we covered with our design. We know what conditions we are targeting. We know what we can then look very easily is these are the habitats, these are the conditions, these are the microhabitats or specific other requirements that I haven't covered with the tools I had on hand. And this is what I will incorporate in my management plans in order to ensure that this specific species has been taken into consideration.
Yeah, and I just think it speaks volumes about the tool to help bring that all together. And absolutely, I think there's much more that we can do as a B&G community to build in those species-specific requirements and advice, not just in terms of when you're looking at the metric, but the long-term management as well. So please do something on LinkedIn, because it sounds a really interesting case study. And I think there's certainly a space for that. Nicole, is there scope to introduce GIS, do you think, for this tool?
Nicole's laptop decided to
Restart.
Oh, here is Nicole.
Nicole, we've got a question about, is there any scope to introduce GIS and bring in, I mean, the connectivity metric, but just generally, how do you think this would work in GIS?
Yeah, this is something we were discussing early doors when we were looking at this. I'm just going to accept you're not going to see my face, but I am happy about the question. There we go. It was something we were looking to consider initially, where it was like, how can we look at more spatial arrangements to correlate that to suitability, taking into account what a lot of the question has done, like if you're producing a mosaic of habitats, is there any way we can say, oh, this is better than just producing one really suitable habitat, but we've got 3 or 4 that are moderate suitability, that's a bit more resilient for the future. So it's something we're definitely thinking about as a future project.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly because so many people are setting up, you know, the B&G metric and things like that in a GIS platform. I think getting the tool out there and then seeing, you know, what the place could be for that.
And there is so much that will be done. Yeah, it's yet to be done. Sorry. So consider, for example, what is the species presence? What information we have on GIS platforms with regards to reptile hotspots, how climate change affects the movement of reptiles in the future. Is the habitat suitability we are talking about today what we will have to consider in 10, 20 years' time? Are we now designing habitats looking 30 years ahead? Have we considered all these factors? So GIS tools will play a huge role in the future on how we bring all this information and all these tools together to understand even better the resilience of the habitats for this species.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anna, I'm going to volunteer you for this one. We have Ellie, who's, thank you for a wonderful explanation of the topics. She's considering doing reptiles and B&G for her uni dissertation. Do you think it's a good idea? Ellie, if I was you, I'd send out her a note on LinkedIn, if that's okay.
Yes, and we are here to support.
Yeah, so Anna's pretty good on anything to do with reptiles and research, but send her a note on LinkedIn because that would be fantastic. Okay, final minute. Now, we do have, thank you very much for questions. What we'll do, we'll download them and then we'll post them on LinkedIn. So there's some really interesting questions about what can count. Neil, you've written a great question as well about reptile presence. So do watch this space on LinkedIn. We'll get to those questions. Do watch this space. The team here are doing brilliantly in terms of looking at that web page, and we have had a number of people saying, yes, please, they'd like this tool. So firstly, thank you. You know, I think that this is such an exciting time now. It's like the baton has been handed over. There is so much that we can do with mandatory B&G, and tools like this and building up this community of practice is so important. But I really want to thank the team here. You spent so much time and dedication. I mean, just the 900 scores blew my mind when I had a look at it, but also the way that you did the spreadsheet to make it super easy to use, I think is just fantastic. So team, thank you very much indeed. Final word, we're out of time, but Anna, Nicole and Vicky. Just a final word about really bringing B&G and reptiles together. What is your hope that people take away from this webinar?
Me first. I guess for me, it's a supporting tool. That is the essence of what we've tried to do. It's something to help us all in everything we do in our daily lives as ecologists. So it's just something else to help us along.
Okay, next. Yeah, for me, it's just like something to help people think of the bigger picture. You know, it's a tool to help people look at B&G and reptiles in conjunction with another, to help people envision how it'll all work at the end. Yeah.
Well, you will probably guess what my answer on this is, Julia. I do love a good spreadsheet. I do think that this, all of these tools give us the opportunity to put the knowledge on a paper and be able to analyze what we are talking about and see in practice how these things work. So, and it's just the start. This is only the start of a journey. I think that there will be many years to follow where we will be discussing an holistic approach on biodiversity net gain and protected species mitigation, and bringing the biodiversity net gain hierarchy and mitigation, or hierarchy, even closer together. I think this is what this is about. And giving in the long term the opportunity for discussion on what we can do better.
Thank you very much. I love that. This is just the start. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. We know it's a busy time and we really appreciate this. Team, thank you very much. And Christy at CI, thank you as well for hosting us. Okay, bye for now. Thanks all.